Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today we're going to be doing a short tutorial on how to paint a Primaris Space Marine Eliminator. The first colour that we're using on this guy is Vallejo Black. We're going to be using this to do all the joins in his armour and the main body of his rifle. When we come back, we'll have all of the black finished. So the first colour that we're going to use to get that green base coat is Vallejo Reflective Green. It's a nice military, dull, matte green, and it'll look great as the base colour for the camouflage. Now you just want to give it a smooth, even coat all the way over the cloak, so if you finish it and there's a bit of a streak, just give it another layer and that should be fine. And when we come back, we'll have all the reflective green finished. The next colour that we're going to do is Vallejo Brown Sand. Now we're going to use this for the sort of yellow beige colour that you have on the Combat 95. And what you want to be doing is doing a couple of big patches of it and having little lines of the same colour stretching out from it. So whereas we've got this part here, you want to have a little section, thin section jutting out, and have these shapes bending in different directions all over the cloak. Now in between the bigger sections you also want to do like little tiny splodges, which you'll be able to see on the next clip, in between them just to break up the green patches. When we come back, we'll have all the brown sand finished. The next colour that we're going to use is Citadel Mournfang Brown, and that's going to be doing similar kind of shapes as the brown sand, but slightly smaller. Now you can see the brown sand that I've put on there. You've got a few different shapes and they all sort of leave green space in between and space to add the brown. But when you're applying the brown, you also want to make sure that it is covering some of the green and the brown sand. So you're applying this one over the top of the other ones and don't worry about trying to fit it in between. If it goes over it and you leave a line, just blend it in, make it into part of the camouflage. When we come back, we'll have all the Mournfang Brown finished. So the next colour that we're going to be using is Vallejo Black, and this is to do the final layer of the camouflage. Now if you look back at the picture of the Combat 95 camouflage, you'll see that the black is often in thin strips with only rare thicker parts, and then often at the end of the lines they might have two dots or a little space, then another little line. So that's the effect that we're trying to go for here. Now is the final colour, it goes over all the other colours, so don't worry about going over the browns, the beiges or the greens. When we come back, we'll have all the black finished. So you can see the finished camouflage pattern there with all four colours. Now we're just going to be using a little bit of olive drab to do some more details on the cloak. We're going to be using this to do the little straps that you'll find all around it. I'm basing the colour of these off the old army kit, where you'd have your black buckles and you'd have your olive coloured straps on the weapon, on the bergen and that. So this fits in quite well with the camouflage pattern. When we come back, we'll have all the olive drab finished. Moving on to the shades now. The first one we're going to use is Citadel Athonian Camoshade, and this is a nice camouflagey kind of green colour, goes well with the olive drab, and all we're doing is we're working it into all the creases where there's green present. You don't want to get it on anywhere else, you don't want to get it over the beiges or the browns, so if you're just working down the creases along the base of the cloak and just get it running up and down each crease. When we come back, we'll have all the Athonian Camoshade finished. So you can see where the Athonian Camoshade has darkened up some of the green creases. Now we're just going to be moving on using a little bit of Agrax Earthshade. We're going to be doing that to do the brown and the beige creases and some general areas on the cloak just to give it a bit of shading. When we come back, we'll have all the shade finished. Now we're going to be using Vallejo Flesh Base. That's going to be to do all the skin on his face. Like so. The next colour that we're going to use is Citadel Mournfang Brown. We're using this for all the straps and the pouches on him. Apologies for the dodgy camera angle there. When we come back, we'll have all the Mournfang Brown finished. Now we're painting up his base with Mechanicus Standard Grey. By his base I mean all these little bits of rock and stone which is underneath him. I'm just going to give this a really basic paint job. When we come back, we'll have all of this grey finished. Now we're using Citadel Rakarth Flesh. This is just going to be to do the parchment area on the purity seals. When we come back, we'll have all of Rakarth Flesh finished. Next up is Citadel Mephiston Red. This is just to do the top of the purity seal. Also some of the lenses on his night vision goggles and his rifle. Like so. Now we're moving on to Vallejo Model Air Chrome. I like to use this on the Imperial Space Marines because it's a nice bright silver metallic. I like to keep them looking a bit brighter and a little less dark than the Chaos or Orc equivalents. When we come back, we'll have all the chrome finished. Now we're just going to touch up the yellow of his armour with Averland Sunset. There's a few areas where I've scraped off the mould lines or he's not quite been well sprayed when he's been on the sprue, and I've base coated them with the spray Averland Sunset. So I'm just touching up those areas now, so you may not need to do this section. When we come back, we'll have all the Averland Sunset finished. Next we're just going to use a little bit of Vallejo Beige Brown just to do his hair, so if you want his hair a different colour you can crack on with that. Like so. colour that we're going to use is Vallejo White, and this is just going to be to do the start of his shoulder pad. Like so. Next we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Retributor armour, and that's going to be to do the Aquila on his chest. Now, it's quite hard to get to some of this part, so you just have to do it as best you can. It's quite tucked behind his rifle. Like so. Now the first shade we're going to use is Citadel Fugan Orange, and that's just going to be to do all the joints in his armour. Now rather than splashing this about, you just want to try and get it as close to the joints as possible, so that you don't have as much to go over when you start reapplying the Averland Sunset later. So if you can, just trace that into the joints. When we come back, we'll have all of the Fugan Orange finished. Next up we're going to be using Citadel Reichland Flesh Shade. That's just to do his skin, so a very quick layer. Like so. Next colour that we're going to use is Citadel Seraphim Sepia. Now it's just going to be to do the parchment on his purity seal. Like so. Next we're going to be using Citadel Druchii Violet to do the purity seal and the lenses on his rifle and on his goggles. Like so. Now Agrax Earthshade from Citadel. This is going to be to do all of the brown, so all his straps and belts and that kind of thing. Now we're going to be using Citadel Athonian Camoshade, which is going to be to do over the drab green. Like so. Then the final shade for now is Citadel Null Oil, and that's going to be to do all of the silver metallics. Like so. Now we're moving back onto the colours. We're going to start with Averland Sunset. We're just going to be using this on his armour to go over any of the parts where we might have got a bit of Fugan Orange on there. And just to smooth out any of the yellow that may be a little bit patchy. When we come back, I'll have all of the Averland Sunset finished. Next we're going to be using Citadel Yriel Yellow. So with this layer you want to be highlighting where it's going to be catching the light. So the top part of the plates are going to be catching more light than the bottom half. Unless there's an overhang, in which case you'd have a little bit of a shade underneath the overhang. And then you'd be highlighting a little bit below that. When we come back, I've all the Yriel Yellow finished. Next highlight is going to be Citadel Flash Gitz Yellow. That's a great bright yellow colour this, and you're just going to be highlighting around half the area that you covered with the Yriel Yellow. Should probably have been zoomed in a little bit earlier there, but when it's on a bigger screen you should be able to see that fine. When we come back, we'll have all the flash Gitz yellow finished. Now we've just added a little spot of white to the flash Gitz yellow. We're going to be using this to do a highlight on his armour plates. We're just going to be doing this highlight on the top edges, or the edges that catch the most light. When we come back, we'll have all this highlight finished. Now we're going to be using Citadel Mephiston Red. I'm going to start reapplying the red to the purity seal and the lenses. When you start doing the lenses, you want to be painting on the sort of left hand half of the lens, like so. Next we're going to be using Citadel Wazdakka Red, and this is just to do the next layer of highlights on the seal, and we're also going to use it on the lenses as well to save mixing up colour. So you want to be using the Wazdakka Red on about 2/3 of the area where you painted the Mephiston Red on each lens, like so. Now we've just added a tiny little bit of white to the Wazdakka Red. We're just going to do a highlight where we've just put the Wazdakka Red. So the highlight's going to be covering about half of the area that the Wazdakka Red's on. We're also going to use this as an extreme highlight on the purity seal, like so. And finally for the lenses we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo White, just to put a little bit of reflection on the very left hand side of the highlights, and also a spot in the top right hand corner of each lens, like so. We're now going to be working on a purity seal, starting with Citadel Rakarth Flesh. You want to be highlighting all the ridges, leaving some of the Seraphim Sepia in all the recesses. Like so. Next we're going to be adding a little bit of white to the Rakarth flesh and highlighting the areas that we've just done. Again, you want to think about putting the highlights on the top sides of each of the ridges. Like so. Now I'm just going to do one final extreme highlight. So we've added a little bit more white to the mix. We're just going to do the very tips and edges of each section of the purity seal parchment. Like so. Now we're going to reapply the Mournfang brown. So we're just going to be reapplying this to the leather straps, making sure that you leave some of the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses. Like so. Next we've added a tiny little bit of white to the Mournfang brown. We're just going to highlight the top edges of these straps. Like so. Now we're going to be using Vallejo Reflective Green. And we're going to recolour all the green parts on his rifle and his knee pad. Again, just make sure you leave the shade, the Athonian Camoshade, in the recesses on each of these sections. Like so. we've added a little bit of white to the reflective green. We're just going to highlight these sections. Now on the barrels and the scopes where it's a cylinder, you want to be highlighting these so the highlight goes down about halfway down each side of the cylinder. Like so. I've just added a little bit more white to the previous mix. We're just going to do one final highlight on these green parts. Now when you're doing the highlights on the scope and the silencer, you want to just be doing about a third of the top so that you're leaving the previous highlights showing. Like so. Next I'm going to be using Vallejo Flesh Base. This is just going to be to reapply the skin colour to his head. Now again, just make sure that you leave some of the shade within the recesses of his skin and around the edges of the hairline. Like so. Now we just added a tiny little bit of white to the mix. We're just going to do one little highlight on his skin. Like so. Now we're just going to be using a little bit of Citadel Lead Belcher. That's just going to be to do the bolt carrier assembly in the breech there. And also the extendable tubes which go to the butt of the rifle. Like so. Now we're returning to Vallejo Black. That's just going to be to recolour in the part of his rifle where the green or another colour may have gone onto it. And also any of the joints between his armour, which may have got a little bit of yellow on. When we come back, we'll have all of the black finished. Next we're going to be using Vallejo German Grey. Now, this is a great colour for highlighting black because it's very, very dark. So you can see the highlight, but it's not enough that it makes it all look grey. Again, you just want to be highlighting the upper edges or upper sides, just so it looks like the light is catching it. When we come back, we'll have all of the German Grey finished. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Mechanicus Standard Grey. We're going to do an extreme highlight on the edges of the rifle, just to make them stand out a little bit. Like so. Now we're going to be using a little bit of Vallejo Beige Brown, and this is just going to be to a few little highlights on his hair. Now we're just going to be sort of like spotting it on, doing little tiny brush strokes with a little bit of paint just to highlight it. You don't want to blob that on there. Like so. Now we're just going to do a little bit of wear and tear on his rifle using Citadel Necron Compound, the dry paint. We're just going to lightly do this on some of the edges, the corners where the rifle or the magazine may scrape against something. because this textured paint is very, very shiny, it brings out those edges really, really nice. It does make it look like they've just been scuffed, so there's a nice fresh shine on there. Next we're going to be using Vallejo Black. We're just going to be using this to do the writing on the purity seal. Like so. And that is the Lamenters Eliminator finished. Now, I haven't shown you how to do the checkers on this video because it's quite awkward to get them in there. So what I'll do is I'll link the Lamenters Lieutenant where you can see the full shoulder pad being done, because I used exactly the same method for that, but you'll be able to see it a lot clearer. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.